Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. Creepypastas are great, but does anyone have any creepy true stories? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When my oldest daughter was about 2 to 4 years old, she would watch this claymation kid show called JoJo's Circus. JoJo was a young female clown. My daughter had a stuffed doll of JoJo that had a speaker inside, and when you squeezed different parts of her, she would say different things. She would sing songs, repeat shapes, colors, numbers, etc., as a sort of educational toy. If you were playing with her and didn't touch her for a minute or two, she would say, "Let's play." If you did play with her, she would start to back up. If you didn't, she would shut off. As my daughter got a little older, she lost interest in JoJo. So the doll ended up in a plastic tub in the garage. All stuff to give away, sell in a garage sale, whatever. Our master bedroom was right above the garage. And one night my wife woke me up and said that she heard someone talking. It sounded like it was coming from outside. I listened, and sure enough, I faintly heard what sounded like a child laughing and talking, but it sounded like it was in the house downstairs. We listened to it for a minute or two. Then I decided to go investigate. I looked out the windows and didn't see anything unusual. I made my way downstairs and heard the voice coming from the garage. As I neared the garage door, I recognized the voice as JoJo Doll. I paused by the door and listened. It sounded like someone was frantically pushing the buttons, not letting her finish an entire song or complete a phrase. It would say, "Squit, squit, 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 square," and "three, three, 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 three," like someone was just mashing the buttons. I thought maybe there was some sort of animal attacking the doll, or maybe the batteries were just running low, but for the record, when the batteries would get low in the doll, it would get really slow sounding. It wasn't doing that. So I grabbed a softball bat out of my bat bag that I had in our mudroom. I paused for a second, thinking that I was about to get into a fight with a raccoon or something. I pounded on the door a little bit to scare off whatever it was, but the sound persisted. So I took a deep breath, opened the door, and hit the lights. JoJo was sitting there, sitting up, on top of the plastic bin that she was in. The lid was sealed closed. She completed her phrase and went silent. I stood there for a few minutes, still inside the house, just looking around. It was silent. She wasn't making any more noises. I didn't hear anything moving. Silence. I saw her the moment I opened the door. Nothing was close to her. I walked out into the garage and started poking around, rattling things, trying to make any animals move. Nothing. Then JoJo said, "Play with me." I picked her up. There were no marks, no saliva, no signs that an animal had been tampering with it. I opened the plastic tub that she was in, and everything looked fine. No sign of animals. Weird. I took her out and put her in the trunk of my car so we wouldn't wake us up again. I told my wife it was just JoJo and that her batteries must be running low. I asked her if she or our daughter had gotten her out of the box, and she said no. I spared her the details because she would have never slept in that house again. But it was really weird. It really sounded like something or someone was playing with that doll. And the moment I opened the door, it stopped. Was the doll malfunctioning? Was there an animal of some sort? Was there a ghost kid playing with it? To this day, I have no idea. As a little background, I'm fairly certain that no one has ever died in that house. It was built in 1981, and my wife was childhood friends with the girl that lived there when it was first built. She's still alive, and we bought the house from her divorced mother. We were the second owners. Okay, here goes. Everyone I know has been creeped out by this story, and looking back, it is quite bad. The house I lived in from birth until I was 11 was pretty close to a hospital for mentally ill people. Nothing like in Outlast or House on Haunted Hill, and it's been shut down for a good few years and turned into houses. Anyway, my parents worked there. My mom was a psychiatric nurse, and my dad worked on the wards where the guys were deviants. So they do crap like eating sheets, playing in their shit, scratching their own lips off, crap like that. Anyway, we lived in a house about 500 yards away. From an early age, my parents tell me I'd be heard laughing uncontrollably. This lasted until I was 2, when I'd have full-blown conversations as much as a 2-year-old could. I vividly remember as a kid making shapes with his hands in the light, which would set me off. I used to draw on the walls of my room next to my bed. I seemingly was obsessed with drawing police cars and crowds of people chasing a man. At first, my drawings were unintelligible, but then as I approached 4 to 5, they were getting better. And that's when my parents remembered my drawing. Always police cars, always chasing a man. I showed no interest in police or playing cops, robbers, outside of this. I played with the kid, I believe, and one of the funniest things that happened was he locked me in a coal shed from the outside. He told me to get inside, so I did, and then he ran away. My mom heard me screaming, asked how I got in there, as the only way to lock it was from the outside, and didn't believe me that it was this kid. This is where it gets freaky. As I aged, I grew out of taking notice of the person who seemed to frequent my room. I woke one night, I think I was 6 or 7, to a loud banging downstairs. My parents' room was across the landing, so I walked across. I looked down the stairs and was frozen in terror. We had a draft excluder that was like a snake. It was hanging on the door handle of the front door, swinging. There was a man slowly walking up the stairs. I screamed, and the man went away, and heard a voice telling me to come here. I passed out and woke up in my bed as if it were a dream. I went downstairs the next day and saw the snake still on the handle. Freaked me out. My parents didn't tell me until I was much older that before we lived there, a man had escaped from the hospital. He came to this house and stole a kid, took him back, and hid him in a shed on the hospital site for 2 days before he was found. My friend is a military man, and my family owns a house in rural areas in the Philippines, Nueva Ecija, to be exact. I believe it was some sort of family inheritance. Anyway, the area around the house had been subject to treasure hunters looking for Yamashita's gold. They decided to put a stop to the digging by going there themselves to address the issue and also have a vacation at the same time. Their whole family went, from his dad, who was also from the military, to his mom and his 2 sisters. When they got there, their neighbors advised them to make sure they got inside their house by 5 p.m. without offering any explanation. They found that piece of advice quite odd, but they did so anyway, in case it had something to do with local wildlife. They stayed in their respective rooms that night, but they didn't get much rest because of the strange things that they saw. My friend was getting ready for bed when he noticed that outside the window across the field near their neighbor's property, there was a big dog-like creature. He went to the window to get a better look, and he saw this beast was beside their neighbor's Volkswagen Beetle. What took him aback was that this dog was as big as the car. Then something else caught his eye, a large head sticking out above a line of coconut trees being illuminated by the moonlight, staring right at him, possibly a copper. He quickly closed the windows and decided to stay in bed, not knowing if he was seeing things or not. That same night, his sisters had been hanging out in the dining area when they saw a curtain floating around. At first they thought it was just the wind blowing it around, so they ignored it. After a few moments, they realized that there was no wind. With the windows all closed and only a slight breeze, they freaked out and ran to their rooms, hiding under their sheets for the entire night. His parents weren't spared from this freak show as well. In their room was an antique closet with nothing in it. At random times during the night, it would swing wide open, making quite some noise, and after a while it would slam shut. They were sleepy and tired from the day, so they just let it be, thinking it might have been the wind. The next morning, they recounted their experiences and decided that for the next night, they'll all stay in the living room together, figuring that they'll be safer going to their usual house. And it felt like a waste if they didn't maximize the visit. That night, as planned, they slept in the living room. My friend's slumber was interrupted by the sound of heavy breathing and hot air blowing in his face. He opened his eyes, and his heart skipped a beat after seeing an enormous black mass with red eyes floating above and staring straight back at him. He immediately closed his eyes and tried to grab his gun, but it was just out of reach. He tried to nudge his dad awake, who was beside him, to no avail. He finally decided to whisper to him, "Pa, there's something on top of us." His father then replied in a very annoyed yet freaked out tone, "I know, just shut your eyes and go to sleep." They immediately left at the first sign of light. Their week-long vacation was reduced to 2 days. Also, it just so happens that their house is right beside a crematory. The friend is a very straightforward guy, so coming from him, I tend to believe this story. The only thing he wonders about is not being able to attempt a shot at the floating black thing. But he says he doesn't want to repeat that again. I just asked him to refresh my memory about that story, and his hairs were on end. Goosebumps everywhere. A lot of these stories were good and definitely creepy for sure, so I appreciate them. You guys like this topic? I do. When I was young, we lived in a small rural Alberta city, and I had these dreams about this house that was in the city. I'd never been in it. I had no idea who owned it, but I dreamt about it all the time. Whenever we drove by it, I'd get this feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. I'd stare into its curtained windows, trying to see past them, trying to see what could cause me such emotion about a building. I had no ties either. In the dreams, I would be caught in the house, unable to find the doors. I'd be on the roof with no way down. I'd be in the basement being followed by an unseen being. It's a gorgeous house. 3 stories, balcony off the top floor, large veranda out front. Beautiful. But it scared me terribly. It was always there, watching me. Almost. Sounds stupid, but I was young. Then my mother came home one day. She told me she had bought us a new house, and I knew what house it was. It was the nightmare house. I was right. The house that had plagued me for all those years was to be my home. We lived there for 5 years, and it was a very strange house indeed. I have stories from it. I have no idea what I believe went on in that house, but it was weird. So when I was a little lad, my mother used to rock me to sleep on a hammock because that was the quickest way to get me to fall asleep. One night, while she was alone in the house while rocking me to sleep on the hammock, she was tired and accidentally fell asleep on the floor while rocking the hammock back and forth. She then had a brief dream in which she saw her elder sister, my aunt, who passed away years before I was born. My aunt supposedly walked up to her and sat down in the dream, comforting and telling my mom to go to sleep because she could take over the hammock rocking for my mom. My mom said she immediately woke up and saw the hammock rocking back and forth on its own as if she never stopped rocking it the whole time. My mom dreams about her dead sister all the time. She just shows up and tells my mom stuff. I have 2 stories. Both are a little creepy, and I've only learned about them recently. My mom sometimes likes to go on about stuff. I used to do this as a kid. Now, to preface the first story, I've always had this need to not be near windows. I will go out of my way to be as far away from windows as I can. Anyway, when I was younger, my mom said that I used to have these sleepwalking sessions and would sit in the living room in front of the window doors leading to the backyard. She said I would sit there and talk to the doors for the longest time and would say goodnight and then would get to bed. She said she would never wake me up because it's something you never do to sleepwalkers. Well, one time, she said that there was one incident where I had sat in front of the doors, got up, and started screaming as loud as I could to them. To this day, I have no idea what she's talking about. But again, I do have this nagging thing about windows. Second story. When I was really young, we had this cat named Zip, who we loved a ton. In fact, he used to come to my door and scratch on it every time he wanted some water. When he did, keep in mind, this was really late at night, I would go to the kitchen, get him a small bowl with some water, and leave it on the front of my door. The scratching would stop. Fast forward to when I was 6. Zip had passed away from some kind of heart thing, and my mom said that I never cried when she told me. She also said, after he passed, that I still used to put a bowl of water outside my bedroom. She eventually confronted me about it, and apparently I said that Zip would still scratch my door when he was thirsty.